When a country's military builds something, it's usually done with a specific goal in mind that applies to weapons, vehicles, bunkers, or even full-blown military bases. But when that goal no longer matters, it's not uncommon for these things to be left behind. That means there are forgotten chunks of military history hiding in plain sight all around the world. And in this video, we're going to explore 15 of the wildest ones. And trust us, the last one will definitely shock you. Number 15. Sogil Tank Cemetery. Well, despite the nickname, Sogil Tank Cemetery isn't actually a cemetery, at least not in the usual sense. Located near Lower Saxony, this area is officially part of a restricted military zone. Yet, for decades, locals and curious passers-by have seen a lineup of dozens of old tanks sitting motionless in an open field. Most of these are Leopard 1S and M47 Pattons, obsolete machines by today's standards. A hand-painted sign near the area claims it's the Means shooting range, referencing a town that's about 15 miles away. The same sign warns against trespassing, yet there are no guards, no fences, and no activity that would suggest anyone is watching. The tanks haven't moved in years, nor has anyone officially claimed them. Their presence remains unexplained. Are they targets, storage, forgotten relics? No one seems to know, and the German military has never provided a clear answer. Whatever the story is, the rusting hulks have become part of the landscape, silent giants slowly fading into the soil. Number 14. Wunsdorf Officer Sis House. Now, there's something truly surreal about seeing a statue of Vladimir Lenin standing outside an abandoned officer's house in Zossen, Germany. This isn't some misplaced monument. It's a piece of Cold War history still clinging to relevance. The building belonged to the largest Soviet military base outside of the USSR, often called the Forbidden City. At its peak, 75,000 Soviet troops were stationed here, and it had a direct railway line to Moscow. But the site's history stretches back even further. It began as a Prussian shooting range in 1871, expanded during World War I, and by 1936 even hosted Germany's Olympic team. The Wehrmacht took over before World War II and used it as a command base until the Soviets rolled in by 1945. The Red Army remained until 1994. Today, the statue stands untouched, guarding a crumbling fortress of empty barracks and decaying pride. No cleanup crew, no repurposing, just ghosts of empires past, rusting where they stood. Number 13. Alvira Bunkers. Back in the early 1940s, the quiet village of Alvira in Allenwood, Pennsylvania, had around 100 residents and a steady, small-town rhythm. That all changed after the attack on Pearl Harbor. The U.S. government seized the land to establish the Pennsylvania Ordnance Works, part of an urgent military expansion plan. Homes were bulldozed, lives uprooted, and 149 concrete bunkers were dropped across the landscape to store TNT. But here's the real kicker. Most of those bunkers were never even used. It was a massive overestimation. The war shifted, needs changed, and Alvira was left a ghost of its former self. Eventually, the unused land was handed back to Pennsylvania. What remains today are concrete shells scattered through the forest, some tagged by graffiti, others nearly swallowed by moss and trees. A few stone foundations and the old cemetery are all that's left of Alvira itself. It's a quiet reminder of how wartime urgency can erase entire communities, only to be forgotten when priorities shift. Number 12. Johnston Atoll. Johnston Atoll is a name that doesn't show up on travel brochures, and for pretty good reason. For complete 70 years, the U.S. military used this Pacific island as a toxic playground. They tested nuclear weapons, stored chemical agents like Agent Orange, and ran enough shady operations to black out an entire document archive. The island is technically part of the Pacific Remote Islands Marine National Monument now, run by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. But you can't just roll up to it. You'll need a federal permit, a clearance letter, and a damn good reason. Even then, you're stepping onto a place with soil still contaminated and wildlife living in the shadow of radiation. The military packed up, sure, but they didn't clean house. Concrete shells still sit there, half flooded, half forgotten, while rumors swirl about what really went down. Whether it's still in use for secret operations, nobody's confirming, but the scars are real. This isn't just an abandoned site, it's a sealed-off warning to whoever thinks cleanup is optional. Number 11. Spadeadam Rocket Site. The bleak moorlands of Cumbria, England, hide a forgotten chapter of the UK's space and defense ambitions. The Spadeadam rocket test site was never meant for glamour. It was gritty, practical, and built in response to Cold War paranoia. This is where Britain developed the Blue Streak rocket, a 78-ton intercontinental ballistic missile intended to counter the Soviet threat. While the US launched astronauts with Atlas missiles, the UK quietly tested Blue Streak in the rain-soaked wilderness. But the rocket never made it into military use. Plans shifted, funding dried up, and Blue Streak was repurposed into the Europa space program, which also fizzled. In 1976, the RAF took over the site for radar testing, but even that use has since faded. What's left looks like a concrete fossil from a parallel past, a half-buried monument to ambitions that never fully launched. Most people drive right past it without a clue. But for those who stop, it's a strange reminder of how close Britain once came to the edge of the missile age. Number 10. Fort Wadsworth. Fort Wadsworth sits on Staten Island like a forgotten relic from a time when cannonballs were still a threat. It's one of the oldest military sites in the United States, with a military presence dating all the way back to the Dutch in 1663. The British took it during the American Revolution, and by the 1860s, it had been renamed in honor of Brigadier General James Wadsworth. Throughout the Civil War and into the 20th century, it remained active, though less and less as warfare evolved. By the time it was decommissioned in 1994, most of it had become obsolete. What's left today is a mix of fenced-off bunkers and public access trails. Some parts are still closed off, but others now host birdwatchers, campers, and families on picnic blankets. Concrete structures that once aimed to defend the harbor are now just background for joggers. Wadsworth didn't get destroyed, it got demoted. From battlefield stronghold to quiet overlook. Number 9. Fort Pike. On the outskirts of New Orleans stands Fort Pike, a ghost of America's coastal defense dreams. Built after the War of 1812, it was part of the Third System, forts meant to prevent foreign invasions by sea. The fort was named for explorer Zebulon Pike, and though it looked imposing, it never fired a single cannon in active battle. It sat quiet through the Civil War and stood through 2 world wars, more a symbol than a shield. By 1890, the military left it behind. Later declared a historic site, it held on until nature started fighting back. Hurricane Katrina cracked its walls in 2005. Tropical Storm Isaac followed in 2012, doing more damage. Now Fort Pike exists in limbo, too unstable to welcome crowds, too iconic to tear down without protest. A piece of history not quite preserved, not quite forgotten, just waiting, like so many things in Louisiana, for someone to decide whether it gets another shot or fades out completely. All right, now, let's move to number 8. Cramond Island. Cramond Island doesn't look like a military site at first glance, but cross the long tidal causeway from Edinburgh at just the right time and you'll end up surrounded by a strange mix of nature and wartime decay. During World War II, this small stretch of land became a key defensive point, fortified to stop enemy boats from slipping up the Firth of Forth. Jagged concrete barriers line the causeway, like fossilized teeth jutting from the water. The island itself is scattered with rusted gun placements, weathered bunkers, and skeletal remains of military buildings. You'll also spot remnants from the 19th century when it briefly served as a holiday retreat, long before it became a shield for the city. Today, the island is technically abandoned, though occasionally people still get stuck overnight when they ignore the tide warnings. It's eerie, unpredictable, and completely unforgiving if you time it wrong. Cramond isn't just a leftover from history, it actively reminds you that nature doesn't care about your schedule. Number 7. Bunker 42. Just beneath Moscow's busy Taganskaya district lies Bunker 42, a secret Cold War shelter built 165 feet underground, and so discreet that most of the city never knew it existed. Its entrance was camouflaged to blend in with ordinary buildings, allowing Stalin and his top brass to slip in unnoticed during emergencies. The design? Brutal, efficient, and pure Soviet red carpet corridors, thick steel doors, endless tunnels. Although Stalin died in 1953, 3 years before the bunker became fully operational, the facility became the beating heart of the USSR's airstrike command for decades. From here, retaliation orders for nuclear attacks could be launched instantly, but, like many relics of the era, it outlived its purpose. By the late 1980s, the military had moved out. Now it serves as a Cold War museum, offering guided tours to curious civilians. The command rooms remain, complete with vintage maps, phones, and propaganda. It's part theater, part time capsule, and a chilling reminder of how close the world once danced to disaster. Number 6. Titan 1 Missile Silos. Colorado's got old bones buried underground, and some of them used to hold enough firepower to flatten a continent. During the Cold War, Titan 1 missiles were tucked into silos across the state, ready to launch at a moment's notice. When the program was shut down in 1965, the missiles were removed, but the silos weren't filled in. They're still there, rusting, dark, and wide open if you know where to look. Some explorers crawl inside with flashlights and GoPros, ignoring the fact that half the staircases are crumbling and the air's full of dust that hasn't moved in decades. Inside, the silence isn't peaceful, it's heavy. Graffiti covers the walls. Steel beams droop with corrosion. There's no power, no light, and no one to stop you if something collapses. These places were built to launch weapons across oceans. Now they just wait for time to finish what rust has already started. No tours, no rescue plan, just abandoned concrete and the echo of what could have been. Will you visit this place? Well, it's kinda super cool. Number 5. Vieques Bunkers. Vieques looks like paradise, but beneath the green hills are rows of crumbling bunkers the US military left behind without cleaning up a damn thing. In 1941, they took over most of the island to build ammunition storage and run test drills. The bunkers were dug into the terrain so well that you can barely see them unless you're right in front of them. After World War II, they just stayed. For decades, using the island as a testing site, blowing up parts of it like no one lived there. Locals protested for years, calling out the environmental damage and health issues. Finally, in 2003, the military pulled out, but not before leaving behind unexploded bombs still buried in the dirt. Cleanup efforts exist, but the island is still dealing with what they left behind. Now parts of Vieques are managed by wildlife agencies, but the land remembers. The bunkers are rotting, the soil's still deadly, and the people are still paying the price for a war they weren't even part of. Number 4. Devil Set's Slide Bunker. Sitting like a broken tooth on the edge of a cliff in Pacifica, California, the Devil's Slide Bunker isn't just abandoned. It's been half dismantled by time and construction that never finished. It was built during World War II as part of a triangulation station, meant to give soldiers a direct view of the ocean. The job was low-tech, look out for enemy ships, then radio a nearby artillery crew. When the war ended and radar made the setup useless, the military bailed. Someone later tried to carve out the hillside below it to build something else. Whatever it was, it never happened. What's left now is a bunker barely hanging onto the land. One heavy rain, and it might drop. Still, that hasn't stopped graffiti artists, thrill seekers, and reckless photographers from turning it into a hangout spot. There's no fencing and no signs, but if you fall through a rusted floor, you're done. The place isn't haunted. It doesn't have to be. It's a hazard by design. Number 3. La Frincoque Bunkers. On the windswept coast of northern France, the La Frincoque bunkers still stand, but they're no longer weapons of war, they're canvases. Built by Nazi forces during World War II as part of the Atlantic Wall, these concrete beasts were designed for artillery defense. After the war, the French military reclaimed the site but abandoned it in the 1950s, leaving the bunkers to rot. For decades they crumbled, weather-beaten, moss-covered, almost forgotten. Then came the artists. Starting in the 90s, graffiti writers, muralists, and sculptors began transforming the old structures into public art pieces. One bunker is wrapped in mirrored panels, reflecting the sea and sky like some surreal alien structure. Another's covered in bright mosaic tiles. Each one tells a different story now, still marked by history, but no longer trapped in it. The contrast between decay and color is jarring, but that's the point. These bunkers don't just remind you of war. They force you to see what can grow from its ruins. What do you think about it? Let us know. Number 2. La Coupole. La Coupole sits like a concrete colossus in the hills of Helfauth, near Saint-Omer, France. It was built by the Nazis in 1943 to launch up to 50 V-2 rockets per day at London, an underground missile facility powered by brutal efficiency and 1 million tons of reinforced concrete. Beneath its massive dome, there was room for liquid oxygen tanks, generators, rocket assembly lines, and living quarters for officers. But the facility never fulfilled its mission. In July 1944, the British Royal Air Force bombarded the site with tall-boy earthquake bombs. The dome remained standing, but the blast collapsed the surrounding hillside and wrecked the rocket loading shafts. It was a critical failure for the Nazis, and the site was abandoned before ever launching a single missile. Decades later, in 1997, the bunker reopened as a museum. While most of the exhibits focus on wartime occupation, you'll also find surprising nods to early space exploration. The place wasn't just a normal bunker, it was an unrealized launch pad for destruction. Number 1. Hashima Island. Off the coast of Nagasaki sits Hashima Island, better known by its nickname Battleship Island. In the early 1900s, Mitsubishi turned this rocky outcrop into a coal mining colony. As demand surged, the company filled the island with high-rise housing, schools, shops, and even a hospital. At its peak, over 6,000 people lived shoulder to shoulder in this compact industrial town. Many were Korean laborers, some of them forced to work under harsh conditions, especially during World War II. When the coal ran out in the mid-1950s, life on Hashima stopped almost overnight. The population vanished, and the island sat untouched for decades. Japan barred public access until 2009. Those who've since visited describe a surreal, frozen moment in time, old newspapers still on tables, dishes left in sinks. Though it's mostly known for its mining past, its darker role as a wartime labor camp remains part of its story. Battleship Island isn't just abandoned, it's a monument to industrial ambition, human cost, and the eerie silence that follows collapse. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more amazing content like this. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you very soon.